Oh, yeah. So what I wanted to talk about is maybe the biggest stakes thing that we've ever discussed. And that is Yuval Noah Harari's idea that currently there's no dominant story or narrative for the human race. There used to be, like, a century ago, was sort of a competition between fascism, communism, and liberal democracy, right? And like there were periods when one was more powerful than another, and so on. But now there is no generally believed in story that like the whole human race is sort of into this theme. Mm-hmm. And so Nikola Daniluk, who calls himself Socrates, and it's kind of amusing. Some people who don't know very much about the previous Socrates think that he really is Socrates, but anyway, yeah, he isn't really the old Socrates. Anyway, he is he's done several books on transhumanism and so on. He's still looking to do a book that he's really satisfied with. And he has identified the missing link in what he's writing is the identity, the identification of this new narrative for the human race. But he also has a lot of self-doubt about whether he is capable of, finding this. And so I think that this is something that we can sort of consider. Is it possible for us to figure out what that theme for the future, for the human race could be? And what us would do that? What combination of kind of human wisdom? And initially, I am enamored of the idea that since growing up in Nepal is so different from growing up in the US and Canada, that we would benefit from getting input from our Nepalese colleagues on this question. What did they think the theme for the future could be that the whole human race or much of it could kind of buy into, right? Mm. And so it's a part of the relationship between what I'm doing locally in Canada with students and the course and so on, and contributing to the founding of this new university in Nepal, giving them useful ideas, getting them on the right track. Now, previously, we've talked about how futuristic the input we are providing to that university could be. And we decided that as long as the students are young enough, they can benefit from futuristic thinking. It probably wouldn't be best to start inserting these ideas into their lives when they're in medical school. That's a bit too late, right? Their life is sort of somewhat solidified into a certain pattern by the time you're in medical school or residency. It's hard to completely shift your thinking. But in an undergraduate university with people, say, between 17, 18, and 22, you could certainly have futuristic thinking. But that's a different question from how simple does the presentation need to be. In other words, like a book for the general public, you don't want the language level to be like second year university. You want it to be approximately junior high, right? Like grade 9, grade 10, that's a good level for a book for the general public. So at what teaching level do we think we should be approaching these ideas? And that then brings to mind something that I found kind of amusing at the time. So about 10 years ago, I guess 10 to whatever it would be, 17 years ago, Nikki Olson had a friend, Era, and the two of them were quite close. They did many things together. But Era was sort of politically the dominant person of the two. And to some extent, Era told Nikki what to do. So when Nikki and I began doing tech writing and tech blogs and all this kind of thing together, Era had the opinion that I really should be doing that with her because she was much smarter and all this kind of thing. that I'd picked the wrong person for this, and that she should be having these intellectual interactions. So this wasn't just a thought she had, this was also action. So she had the power in the relationship to simply show up. Like, I'd arranged to study and work together with Nikki Olson, and Era just showed up and said, I should be the same one that the main one that she's teaching, and so on. And the outcome of that was very interesting. That it only happened like once or twice that she was there and we tried to do this intellectual exchange amongst the three of us. But Era had a big complaint about it. She said the subjects were too hard. It was really funny. So it stimulated a poem, and I will read you that poem. I also sent you the video of me reading this poem. All right.
I listened to it.
Yeah, so too hard for Era. Okay, so too hard for Era. Demanding understanding by everyone limits the value of what is done. And what about active resistance to ideas you could understand but don't want to? Limiting discourse to things automatically appealing to the mainstream guarantees no big insights benefiting humanity's team. If we limit every argument to a logic all can follow, then we are resigned to a forever backwater wallow. Then connections and leaps of faith others don't see will never be able to uplift humanity to a whole new level. And we will keep the world disheveled. Who wants a world with nothing new under the sun? Chaotic without needed innovation, working hard on something with endless positive possibilities is more fun than easy work on bounded tasks and civilities. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. In the end, solving things that are hard is the best plan for going forward. So I realized, though, that although, I do agree with what that poem says, there is another way to look at it, which is, for instance, in the things you and I do in the future, we want a book and a general presentation that is broadly appealing. And if we don't pay any attention to to like language that most people can understand, we'll end up with a really elitist thing that only, you know, deeply intellectual people in college will ever be able to read, and we'll never reach the general public. And nowhere is that clearer now. I have sort of 10 years perspective on the video blogs I did for Internet Evolution. And as I was explaining last time, they had a certain structure, this musical sting at the beginning and then the video proper. But there was also a description of the video, which I didn't write. That was written by the people who were the admins for the page, for the site. And it's clear, and it's kind of amusing to think about this in relationship to this idea of too hard for era. Their text almost always indicated that they couldn't really wrap their head around what my video was talking about. They wanted to get sympathy. And so there was always, I think almost always with every video that I did, the text that accompanied it sort of indicated all sorts of questions of, we don't really know what he's getting at here, but here's the video. And the funny thing was, they were then very surprised that a lot of those videos were quite popular and got a lot of likes. And, you know, my ranking on the channel was high because people liked the videos, but the administrators couldn't understand them. So anyway, that's not a bad situation. There needs to be a kind of balance, right? I shouldn't be constantly thinking every time I speak, how do I dumb this down? That would be a bad sort of life, right? If I had to keep worrying about that. And similarly, like when we're thinking about advising the University of Nepal about what they should teach, they also, I mean, they'd have courses at various levels and so on, right? So there needs to be a spectrum from a presentation of a subject that basically everybody who knows how to read would be able to understand, but that lacks the nuances and the details that are maybe really quite important to the full understanding, and that you can only get with the more detailed and higher level description. So I think, as comical as these things are, and I think now that I have like 10 years perspective, it is really amusing to me, just this simple fact that none of the students actually working for me ever complained that the work was too hard. What they did say, which is also true, is I have such a remarkable life because the financial engine supporting a lot of the stuff that we do, the Transpath company, that work is so simple and boring compared to the subjects that we write about and work about on that are so exciting and so on. That was what most students felt, that and they never had any complaint, you know, Dr. Solez, this work is too hard. I'm sorry. No one ever said that. So it's just this wannabe student who was never really a student working with me, but just felt jealous of the students who were. That was the only time that this idea that the work was too hard came up. But if you think about the audience on internetevolution.com, a lot of it was a kind of group of people that I didn't particularly want to cater to. People with strong opinions without ever reading anything, right? Just from nothing, they would come up with a strong opinion while not having any basis in fact for that that opinion. So there were a lot of people like that involved with that site. And that's a reason, I think, that IBM just decided to shut it down. It was costly. They were paying. It was a single source sort of thing. It's not that IBM was one of the people paying. No, it was completely IBM supported. IBM was a very famous company. And as time went on, what the site was doing was less and less fame producing, right? And a lot of ordinary bombastic sort of interchanges between groups of people, neither one of which really knew anything about the subject, just, talking about stuff. And yeah, so I wondered if you all also felt that it's good for us to kind of have a sort of reality testing or realotherapy, whatever, on this subject as our work together progresses. We don't want to leave out the most complicated ideas from the book, but we want the book in general to be able to be understood by the widest possible audience. And so there's a balance. We can always ask ourselves, is this too hard for Era? And the other thing that's kind of cool, if you think about this recorded conversation that we're having now, suppose somebody said, well, he's criticizing the administrators of internetevolution.com. Who were they? Because of the way the site went black on that Friday night, that is impossible to tell. The only evidence of who was running the site was on that site that went dark forever on that Friday night in 2014 and is never coming back, right? So I can't be criticized for being mean to the individual people because nobody will ever know who they were now. That's the other thing that happened. It's not only the content that went dark, but the overarching administrative structure. Right? So nobody will ever know what that structure was, and so that's why I feel I'm not doing a bad thing by pointing out that it's pretty clear that the administrators didn't understand what I was doing. So anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it is desirable for us to keep these things in mind and yet strike a balance between things that are easy enough for everybody, things that have a bit of nuance?
Oh, Kim, I think what's really interesting about your philosophy and your teaching style is that you always do encourage students and anyone else in your vicinity to look outside of the box, right? So to you, the exploration of new ideas, some of which most people might consider radical, like your views on technology, I think it's part of your philosophy to push people to think about ideas in novel ways and to look beyond what our current mindset constraints are. So in terms of saying, okay, are we gonna try to cater to more people by dumbing down? I don't think that should necessarily be the way to look at it. I think we should look at it in a way, how do we try to inspire everyone, no matter what their level of interest or understanding, to just stop and think about subjects in a deeper and more complex manner. So no matter where you're starting from, even if you're someone who thinks things are too hard usually, what if we can get those people too to be like, okay, maybe it's worth thinking about these things that are too hard to think about. And I think that would be a good goal.
Yeah. So, last night, something very interesting happened to me. You may know that for a day now, this has been my Facebook profile picture. And of course, this brings to mind another thing, which is the bigger than life Kim, maybe depictions of the bigger than life Kim should be illegal. We should never have pictures like this where the picture of me is bigger than the real me. Right?
I mean, it is kind of disconcerting to see your face in front of like a larger version of your face. That's kind of the same version of your face to static. There's something disconcerting about it.
Yes, there is.
Humorous. There's something humorous.
Yes, deeply disturbing. But speaking about deeply disturbing, now last night on Instagram direct messaging, a young woman from New Hampshire persistently was asking me questions, like personal questions, shortly after I put up the new profile picture. And so I challenged her. I said, I think before we go any further, we have nothing in common, probably. And almost everything that I do, you will be unable to understand. And she said, what do you mean? And, and then she went through this thing about how if I did this and that, she'd send me her picture and so on. I didn't just say, I don't want your picture, but I did say, well, why don't we try this? Why don't I send you the link to my latest video and see if you agree with me that you don't really understand at all where this video is coming from. So I sent her the latest existential risk video. It worked like a charm. She went completely silent. I never heard from her again.
Well, I'm laughing though about this because sometimes there's people who have fake profiles who interact with people in various social media profiles. And yeah. I don't know, that person sounds like they might have been a fake profile trying to get to you,
They didn't really get anywhere, right?
They were met with something they did not expect, it seems.
That's right.
Existential risks video,
Yeah. But anyway, she's the first person to react in that sort of visceral way to the new profile picture. And I now have a proven formula with how to deal with such people.
Right.
On the behavior,
Who knows?
based on the behavior of the internet evolution administrators who were always deeply baffled by all my videos. So, anyway.
I mean, imagine you're someone who's setting up a phishing scam or some sort of fake Facebook or Instagram profile, trying to get someone to give their contact information to scam someone, and then just write to Kim Solez and get like this video about how they'll never understand what the content are. So
I know, but anyway, what I want to say is, there's certain moments in life where you just feel that success has come unexpectedly quickly. That was one of them. When I look back and I realized there are no other messages from her.
Or him or they, who knows?
Yes. That's right. It could even have been a completely electronic encounter, right? Maybe there was no human at the other end. Yeah. But anyway, so that's what happened. So the other thing to tell you is that Puja Dangana is going back to Nepal in the first week of March, so very soon. So that this transition between me teaching her and her carrying information back to, contribute to the founding of the new university will occur more quickly. And yeah, I'm kind of intrigued at how the next phase goes. But anyway, it'll be fun. Now, the other thing I wanted to discuss, it I think pretty surprising. Like when I introduce this subject, you'll be thinking, I never imagined this could ever be a subject. And
Okay.
that is the relationship between the room that we sort of jointly inhabit. I'm actually here, but your name is on the door and there are cutouts
Yeah.
of you and so on, and the
My virtual
janitorial
home.
staff. Now,
Okay.
in my old office, my bigger office, I was sort of their favorite client, or doctor whose room they were looking after. And there were many things to indicate that the janitors really liked the fact that the room was so colorful and had all this interesting activity with young people learning stuff and so on going on all in the same room. But now we have compressed things so that those same activities are going on, but in a smaller space. And so some time ago, I began realizing that they weren't doing anything useful in here. They were coming in and like turning on the lights and leaving them on all night and stuff like that. So out the window, they probably thought people can see in here, but the distance between us and the adjoining building is such that nobody can see much detail. Leaving on the lights all night doesn't really serve any purpose at all, except to make me feel that I don't really control my own office, right? I turn the lights off, I come back the next day and the lights are on. Yeah, so it became apparent that like the janitorial staff is incapable of working in here without being so distracted by all the stuff that they can't really do proper janitorial work. So the janitor that I knew the best came to see me to say that his boss said that they could not provide janitorial services here anymore, but I can just put the trash out in the hall and they'll take care of it. And so I accepted that because that's really better than them just coming in here and doing random things and not cleaning, but just, like taking stuffed animals and putting them in embarrassing positions and stuff like that, So, and it's to some extent in a poorly defined group of people in that sometimes the janitors I know are on holiday and other janitors are here and stuff. It'd be hard for me to figure out if I was going to engage in some religious conversion of all the janitorial staff. So they would, respect everything that we're doing in this room and so on. That would be very complicated because I don't know how many people I would have to reach. I don't think that. So my wife has become quite inspired by this. She's getting a new vacuum cleaner for us here because she's kind of embarrassed that the vacuum cleaner I brought in is like 25 years old, and new mop and mop pail and everything you need to keep a particular office room. So I'll now have my own stuff, and but I think now if you compare our lives with the lives of everybody else on the planet, like somebody could say, Qing, your experience with Dr. Solez is not so unusual. There are lots of good storyteller, doctor kind of types in the world and so on. And, he's just one of them. So like, just that, you've had a generic experience with a semi-interesting person, right? But, it's no different. You could say, all right, you say that, but the other people you're thinking of do the janitors still clean their office, or do they provide the janitorial service for their own office because the janitors are so distracted just entering the office that they can't do their work properly? And
Yeah,
you know that they would say, no, I've never heard of anybody whose office was so distracting that they, yeah. So you see, we have set ourselves apart from the rest of the human race who do have activities that a janitorial staff be able to easily cope with and be able to provide service. Yeah.
The highest honors bestowed by a janitorial staff to any office. You've collected it.
I think so. Yeah, totally. So anyway, I just think that's kind of cool. And so it seems to be working. And so I think that the next step in here from the kind of intellectual exchange part will be that Terran Stokowski will get her own shelf. So you'll have a shelf, and then she'll have a shelf in the same set of bookshelves there.
Very good.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to put any additional names on the door, because for a room this size, to more than 3 names is a bit excessive. But we do have a lot of people here now. So we have cutouts. There are a total of, I think, 17 people in the office, if you can count the cutouts plus the actual people, right?
Right.
So that's kind of a lot of people for a small office during a COVID-19 pandemic. So there again, does anyone that you're currently talking to, are they in an office inhabited by 17 closely spaced people where you can guarantee that it's safe for COVID-19? And the answer would have to be no, right? So we have an absolutely unique circumstance.
Oh yeah.
You are a part of, you see.
Absolutely.
So there, yeah.
Yeah. I'm very honored by the experiences that my cardboard cutout twin self is living right now.
Yeah,
and all the things, unique things that this other self of mine is experiencing. It's quite unlike any other,
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop the recording now.